Three families, 61 days, nobody stopped at Kennel 7. Kiwi, a 25-pound Golden British Shorthair with eyes like amber glass and an expression that suggested she had already assessed you and found you mildly disappointing, had every reason to stop trusting people. Then, a 69-year-old widow walked through the shelter door, paid $220 for the cat everyone else gave back, and what happened on night 9 changed both of them in ways nobody saw coming. Nobody warned her about the silence. Not the shelter workers, not her daughter, who called twice a week, not the well-meaning neighbors who left casseroles on the porch and said things like, "You'll find your rhythm." Nobody warned Margaret Calloway that a house built for 2 people could become a geography so foreign that even the familiar things, the coffee mug on the second shelf, the reading lamp by the armchair, the particular creak of the hallway floor could feel like artifacts from someone else's life. Her name was Margaret. She was 69 years old. She had been a school librarian for 31 years. She kept her late husband's Harold's reading glasses on the nightstand because moving them felt like an admission she wasn't ready to make. She still set 2 placemats at the kitchen table every morning before catching herself. Harold had been gone for 14 months, and the house, their house, the one they had filled with 42 years of ordinary and extraordinary life together, had slowly turned into something that echoed. Kiwi arrived at the Maplewood Animal Rescue on a Wednesday in late October. She had been found in the parking lot of a hardware store, sitting perfectly upright in a cardboard box, as though she had simply decided to wait there until someone made better arrangements. She was 2 years old. She weighed 25 pounds. She had the round, serious face of someone conducting an important meeting and the dense golden coat of something that belonged in a nature documentary about undiscovered islands. She was, by any measure, spectacular. She was also, according to the shelter intake form, the third time a surrender. The first family kept her for 16 days before calling to say she was too demanding. The second family lasted 3 weeks, long enough to purchase $180 worth of premium cat furniture that Kiwi immediately claimed as her personal territory and then systematically ignored in favor of sitting directly in the center of the dining room table. The third family returned her on a Sunday with a single-sentence explanation: "She judges us." The shelter director, a woman named Carol who had worked in animal rescue for 19 years and genuinely thought she had seen everything, read that note twice and then wrote in Kiwi's file, "Highly intelligent, deeply selective, will not pretend otherwise." For 61 days, nobody even paused in front of Kennel 7 until Margaret. She had not planned to go to the shelter. She had planned to return a library book, stop for groceries, and come home before the afternoon light changed, because she had learned in 14 months that the house was harder at certain hours than others. But she took the wrong turn off Birchwood Avenue, a turn she had never taken in 20 years of living in that town, and found herself in the parking lot of Maplewood Animal Rescue at 2:14 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in December. She sat in the car for 4 minutes before going inside. Carol showed her through the kennels with the practiced gentleness of someone who understood that not every visitor was ready to say what they were actually looking for. Margaret walked slowly. She stopped at a few cats, smiled politely, moved on. And then she reached Kennel 7. Kiwi was sitting in the exact center of her enclosure, upright, perfectly still, watching Margaret with the focused attention of someone who had been waiting for a specific person to walk through a specific door. She did not meow, she did not press against the bars, she simply looked at Margaret with those amber eyes and held the gaze for a long, unhurried moment. "She's been here 61 days, Carol said carefully. 3 families returned her. She's particular about people." Margaret looked at Kiwi, Kiwi looked at Margaret. "I'll take her." Margaret blinked. "You don't want to think about it?" "I've been thinking about things for 14 months. I'm done thinking." She paid the $220 adoption fee. She drove to the pet store and spent $340 on food, a bed, a litter box, and a brush. She drove home and set everything up in the living room with the careful attention she used to give to preparing for house guests. Then she opened the carrier. Kiwi walked out, sat down in the middle of the living room floor, and began to survey her new environment with the unhurried thoroughness of a property inspector. The first 3 days were quiet in a different way than the silence Margaret had grown used to. Kiwi moved through the house on her own schedule, methodical, observant, entirely unbothered by Margaret's presence, but not particularly seeking it either. She located every window, she tested every surface, she found Harold's armchair on the afternoon of day 2, stepped up onto it, turned twice, and settled into it with the decisive authority of someone who had been looking for exactly this chair, and was relieved to have found it. Margaret stood in the doorway and looked at Kiwi and Harold's chair, and did not say anything for a long time. That evening, for the first time in 14 months, she did not eat dinner standing at the kitchen counter. She sat down, She ate at the table, alone, but somehow less alone than she had been the night before. Kiwi jumped up on the chair across from her, Harold's chair at the table, and watched her eat with the focused interest of someone who had important thoughts on the meal, but had decided to keep them to herself. "You are very opinionated," Margaret said. Kiwi blinked once, slowly, as if to say, "Yes, and this surprises you?" It was the first full sentence Margaret had spoken inside the house in 4 days. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed yet, honestly, that breaks my heart a little. Hit subscribe. You'll want to be here for what comes next.
A routine emerged the way routines do, not announced, just suddenly present. Every morning at 6:47 a.m., Kiwi would walk to the bedroom door and sit. Not meow, not scratch, simply sit. The weight of her presence, 25 pounds of quiet certainty, was enough. Margaret would open her eyes to find those amber eyes already watching her, patient and steady, as if to say, "The day is starting. You should be in it." Every evening, Kiwi would bring Margaret one specific object, not a toy, not a random item, but always the small crocheted blanket that had lived on the back of the living room sofa for 11 years. She would carry it in her mouth, drop it precisely at her feet, and then sit and wait. Margaret did not know what the ritual meant exactly, but she began to look forward to it in a way she hadn't looked forward to anything in a very long time. Some stories are too good to keep to yourself. By the 4th week, something had shifted. Margaret started calling her daughter on Tuesday evenings instead of waiting for her daughter to call. She started buying fresh flowers on Wednesdays, tulips, because Harold had always brought tulips. She started leaving the radio on in the kitchen in the mornings, something she hadn't done since the house went quiet. Kiwi watched all of it, not with the detached interest of an observer, but with the quiet attention of someone keeping careful track. And then came the night that changed everything. It was the 9th night. Margaret had been asleep for 2 hours when she woke to a sound. Not a loud sound, not an alarm, but a low, insistent sound at the very edge of her awareness. A rumbling, close, purposeful. She opened her eyes. Kiwi was on the pillow beside her, not at the foot of the bed where she usually settled, but directly beside her, pressed against her shoulder, her entire body vibrating with a purr so deep it seemed to come from somewhere structural, like the house itself was humming. Margaret lay still. The purr continued, steady, unhurried, entirely deliberate. She thought about Harold, about the particular way he used to reach for her hand in the middle of the night, half asleep, without explanation, just to confirm she was there. Not words, just presence, just, "I know you're here, and that matters." Kiwi pressed closer. Margaret put her hand on that warm, dense golden back and felt the vibration move through her palm and up her arm and into somewhere she hadn't been able to reach for 14 months. She cried, not the difficult, private crying she had been doing alone in that house for over a year, but something softer, something that felt, for the first time, like it might have an end. Kiwi did not move, did not startled, simply stayed. This is the kind of love that deserves to be seen. 3 families called her too demanding, too judgmental, too much. What they missed was this: Kiwi was not difficult. She was precise. She did not give her attention easily because her attention was worth something. She had been waiting through 61 days of shelter kennels and 3 families who couldn't hold still enough to be chosen for someone who was ready to be seen as clearly as she saw them. Margaret was ready. She just hadn't known it when she walked through that door. Today, 7 months later, Kiwi still brings the crocheted blanket every evening. She still occupies Harold's armchair with total authority. She still watches Margaret eat breakfast from across the table with those amber eyes that seem to be calculating something just beyond the range of human comprehension. And every morning at 6:47 a.m., without fail, she is there, at the bedroom door, waiting, not because she has to, not because she was trained to, but because somewhere in those 61 days of being returned and overlooked and written off, she held on to the understanding that the right person was still out there, and that when she arrived, she would need someone to remind her that the day was worth starting. Margaret Calloway needed that reminder more than she knew. Sometimes the ones nobody wanted are exactly who you needed all along. If you're thinking of opening your home to an animal, especially one that has been returned, passed over, or labeled difficult, please don't let those words stop you. Take the time to understand what they need. Be patient with the quiet ones, the selective ones, the ones who don't perform their love for the first stranger that walks past, because sometimes the love that takes longest to arrive is the kind that stays longest. And sometimes at 6:47 in the morning, it's the only alarm clock you'll ever need. Do you believe that animals choose us, or do we choose them? Tell me in the comments.